Dawn broke across the barren landscape, bringing with it an icy breeze that carried the sharp temps of spilled blood through the air. Elias Ward tugged at his horse's reins, his steel-colored gaze narrowing as he spotted the timber fence surrounding. His inherited property, what he witnessed, made him question his own vision. 5 women dangled from nooses, swaying like macabre sentinels before his gateway. Their torn clothing danced in the morning air. Faces obscured by tangled hair, naked, toes moving to an invisible dirge. Crude wooden placards hung from their chests. Knife-carved letters now visible in the growing daylight. This territory don't belong to you. Morrison's claim stays Morrison's claim forever. Elias's fingers tightened around the leather straps, his mouth going bone dry. Uncle Jeremiah had willed him this property, a fresh start following those brutal war years. Instead of finding a welcoming frontier homestead, he discovered 5 motionless forms, suspended like a devastating blow to his hopes. His mount whinnied nervously, shifting restlessly beneath him. Elias dismounted, his worn boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a dull thud. Moving closer, his weathered palm shook as he pressed it against one woman's throat. A weak heartbeat pulsed back, then another from the next victim. Life flickered within that frigid morning air, igniting something fierce inside Elias's soul. This situation had evolved beyond simple property inheritance. Someone had issued a blood-soaked ultimatum from powers determined to consume everything in their path. Choosing to slice through those ropes meant diving headfirst into a tempest that would consume all in its wake, possibly including his own existence. I appreciate you joining me for tonight's tale. Share with me your location as you listen, wherever you may be. I wish you safety and hope joy finds you always. Elias's blade caught the light as it severed the first hemp rope cleanly. The unconscious woman plummeted, but he managed to catch her falling form. Purple bruises circled her neck from the noose's cruel grip, her breathing shallow yet persistent. Without hesitation, Elias continued his rescue mission, cutting each, binding and gently placing all 5 victims on the frozen ground. They formed a tragic line outside his cabin's entrance. Their skin ice-cold from the overnight exposure, though several eyelids trembled between agony and darkness. He reversed his knife's grip and began slicing the restraints binding their wrists and feet. His hands shook upon seeing the evidence of violence, flesh marked with beatings and welts. Whip marks crisscrossed their bodies like some savage judgment carved into human skin. Their tormentor had intended a slow, agonizing death, not merely as execution, but as a stark warning to anyone daring enough to trespass on this territory. One by one, he carried them beneath his cabin's front overhang. The interior lay shrouded in complete darkness, dust coating everything like funeral cloth. Yet there remained sufficient space for 5 broken souls to rest. Elias kindled a flame. The dancing amber light gradually revealed their features. The first possessed ebony hair and keen eyes. Even while delirious, a wound across her cheek revealed a warrior who had fought until her final moment. The second bore crimson locks and split lips, yet maintained her proud, rebellious bearing. The third showed a delicate build with golden tresses and gentle features that retained elegance despite her suffering. The fourth had obsidian eyes, half-closed but calculating, wrapped in enigma. The final woman was older. With auburn hair and a serene presence like a protective matriarch, Elias required no explanation. These women hadn't been selected randomly for this horrific display. Someone wanted him to understand this message completely. Outside, the wind wailed, carrying the bitter aroma of hemp and lingering cordite smoke. Elias positioned himself against the cabin door, his Winchester across his knees. The firelight, reflected in his weathered silver gaze, summoning memories of conflicts he'd believed were finished. But the frontier rarely allows a man to choose tranquility so easily. Uncle Jeremiah often said, "Property isn't purchased with currency alone, it must be defended with sacrifice." Now that wisdom stood undeniably before his gate in the form of 5 trembling survivors. In that profound silence, Elias comprehended his situation. No retreat remained possible. Saving these women meant confronting the type of men who would hang females like banners at an entrance. Abandoning them would strip away his humanity entirely. A harsh cough shattered the quiet. The dark-haired woman's eyes opened first, flames reflecting in her pupils. Her throat bore deep crimson bruising, her voice fractured and raw, yet still commanded authority. "Don't abandon us here." Elias knelt beside her, carefully trickling water from his canteen. Between her parched lips, she drank as though swallowing existence itself along with all its accompanying despair. Once her breathing stabilized, she sat upright, her stare sharp as steel, cutting directly through him. "Do you understand you're marching straight into devastation?" Before Elias could respond, additional groans echoed throughout the cabin. The red-haired woman forced herself upright, rage blazing in her penetrating blue eyes. The blonde stirred conscious, exhausted yet clinging desperately to Elias's shirt, seeking something. Anything to anchor herself. The elder woman moved quietly, assisting each of them, her steady presence confirming what Elias already sensed. She had been their pillar throughout this ordeal, the cabin filled with labored breathing and gentle fire crackling. Elias offered more water and shared pieces of stale bread. Few words were spoken, but their eyes conveyed identical messages, wariness and a test of faith. Finally, the brown-haired woman spoke. Her voice carried low authority, representing them. "All, we didn't hang ourselves at that entrance. That display came from the man who controls this settlement now. He wants anyone arriving here to witness the consequences." Elias clenched his fist, knuckles whitening. He had suspected this truth, but hearing it spoken aloud set his blood ablaze. The redhead released a bitter laugh, filled with fury and warning. "If you possess any wisdom, you'll mount that horse and flee far from here. We're already dead. Taking us in means you'll perish alongside us." Elias raised his head, his steel-gray eyes scanning each face before responding with quiet determination. "I severed those ropes. From that instant forward, your destiny became intertwined with mine." In the firelight, the black-haired woman pushed herself upright. Her lips curved into a weary yet defiant smile. "Then listen carefully, landowner. You didn't just inherit a dwelling, you've just inherited warfare." Her declaration fell like gunshots in the darkness. Elias understood from that moment onward, peace no longer remained an option. The path ahead wouldn't involve planting crops or raising livestock. It would demand bloodshed and confronting the shadows closing around them. That evening, flames crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across scarred faces. After receiving water and makeshift bandages, the women slowly regained consciousness. Though still weak, their eyes burned not with terror, but with the fire of those who had walked through hell and emerged. The older woman, Grace, spoke first. Her voice resonated steady and deep, each word seeming carved from suffering. "The man who strung us up at the gate calls himself Morrison in town. He's a respected judge, but beneath that black robe he traffics in human lives, purchases people, creates false documents, transforms women into property. We resisted, and this became our punishment." Elias tightened his jaw, veins bulging. Across his neck, Morrison's name echoed from old war tales like death scent wrapped in human flesh. "Ruby." The redhead straightened herself, her eyes flashing with rage. "He burned my home to ashes, then attempted to force me into signing debt. Contracts. I refused. That night, I was dragged away while my little sister screamed. I vowed to watch him bleed." Sadi, the blonde girl, trembled while clutching a worn scarf. "I only desired a peaceful existence on our small farm. He accused my father of stealing horses, then claimed me as payment. My father hanged himself the following day. I have nowhere remaining to go." The firelight danced in Violet's dark eyes, the quietest among the five. She lowered a small leather pouch to the floor. Inside lay papers, property deeds, forged seals, contracts, and maps evidence. "We don't merely bear scars, we carry proof." He believed hanging us would bury everything, but, as you witness, we continue breathing. The room fell silent, except for wind howling through board gaps. Elias observed each face. Grace, solid as granite. Ruby, burning with intensity. Saudi, shaken, yet persistent. Violet, quiet and perceptive. And Clarabelle, the black-haired one, silent as embers about to ignite. Clarabelle leaned toward Elias, her eyes glowing in the firelight. You believed you came here to claim property. But this territory is a battlefield, and Morrison permits no neutrality. You cut us down, meaning you've chosen your allegiance. Elias remained silent, simply reaching forward to add another log to the fire. Sparks leaped upward, illuminating the weathered face of a frontier warrior. In that silence, he knew one certainty. His past had finally caught up with him, and fate had bound him to these 5 women in a conflict that was no longer theirs alone. Thank you for being present. If this tale stirred something within you, memories of dusty evenings, the sound of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, consider subscribing to my channel so we can gather together daily. And I'll share another story. From the frontier, the following morning, thick fog shrouded the valley. Elias sat on the porch steps, gripping a steaming coffee mug, while his Winchester rested nearby. He could hear every shallow breath from inside the cabin, every slight movement from the women who had just escaped death's grip. But that fragile, peaceful moment couldn't endure. In the distance, hoofbeats resonated, first scattered, then faster, pounding like battle drums. Elias set down his cup, eyes narrowing toward the dusty crimson trail leading into the fields. The fog began lifting, revealing 3 dark horses. They halted atop a ridge, silently observing the cabin. The lead rider wore a lengthy coat, broad-shouldered and erect in his saddle. Even from that distance, Elias could see how the man's hand rested on his revolver's grip. Casual, as if human life were merely another calculation, Clarabelle stepped onto the porch, her ebony hair disheveled, still shadowing the rope-marked portion of her face. She gazed out and whispered, her voice cold. As Winter, it's Morrison. He knows we survived. Ruby rushed to the window, fury illuminating her features. I knew it. He won't release us. That pack of scavengers will destroy us if given the opportunity. Saudi clung tightly to Grace's hand, trembling, while Violet stood. Motionless and silent, her eyes hard as polished granite, Elias looked at them, then slowly rose and reached for his Winchester. No words were necessary, the decision was already written in his steely gaze. Hoofbeats again. Not just 3 now, but dozens. One by one, riders emerged from the tree line, joining the formation. Torch flames flickered through the mist as they spread out slowly, encircling the cabin like predators closing on their prey. Grace gripped Elias's arm, her voice shaking but her words firm. You still have an escape route. We don't leave now, and you might survive. Elias shook his head gently. He placed his calloused hand on his rifle's stock, his voice low and gravelly like stones grinding together. I made my decision last night. This is my territory now, and it's our stronghold. Clarabelle looked at him, green eyes blazing in the fading firelight. She stepped closer and handed Elias a worn dagger, its blade dulled by time. If you're going to stand with us, then understand this. This is no longer about inheritance. This is warfare. Outside, a horse whinnied loudly and wildly. Dust swirled as Morrison's gang descended the slope, the fog giving way to the bloodthirsty faces of killers. The old cabin had transformed into a fortress, and every breath inside, prepared for a night of fire and fury, darkness fell more rapidly than usual, consuming the valley entirely with only Morrison's men's flickering torches piercing the gloom. More than 20 gunmen stood shoulder to shoulder, their laughter loud and merciless. Horses snorted and pawed the earth as if already tasting triumph. Inside the cabin, Elias checked his Winchester's ammunition, each round clicking into place with dry, metallic precision. He surveyed the 5 women rope marks still scarred there. Skin, but their eyes blazed with determination. He handed Ruby an old Colt, gave Saudi a sawed-off shotgun, slipped Violet a hunting knife, and a derringer for her sleeve. Grace clutched a worn musket while Clarabelle gripped a Navy Colt like it was part of her arm. We're not just fighting for survival, Elias said, his voice low and steady. We're fighting to end their executioner's game permanently. Outside, Morrison rode forward, his voice echoing, "Hand them over." "That cabin isn't yours, Ward. You cut them loose yesterday and signed your death sentence today." Elias stepped onto the porch, his voice hoarse but unshakable. "This property belonged to Jeremiah, and now it's mine. If you want it, you'll have to go through me." Before his words finished, a gunshot cracked the night. A bullet splintered the wooden gatepost. The wolves charged like a flood. Elias ducked back inside and slammed the door shut. Gunfire exploded. Windows shattered. Ruby screamed and fired, the shot tearing through a man scrambling onto the porch. Sadi, trembling with eyes shut tight, pulled the shotgun's trigger. The blast blew the door apart, dropping 2 men in crimson rain. Violet waited. In silence, hidden in shadows, she struck a knife, flashing into a raider's throat as he slipped inside. He thrashed, then dropped to the floor, eyes wide in shock. Grace pulled Sadi back, then lit a kerosene jar and hurled it out the window. Flames roared up, halting the horse's charge. Morrison barked orders, his men fanning out and firing blindly. Bullets ripped through walls, gun smoke thick in the air. Wooden splinters flying like blades. Elias dropped low, calmly working the Winchester's lever. One shot, one rider falling. In the chaos, Clarabelle rushed to Ilias's side, firing 2 shots. Smoke curled around her face, her green eyes lit with fury and pride in the firelight. Screams, gunshots, and hoarse cries blended into hell's symphony. Jeremiah's old cabin was no longer a refugiate, it was a burning fortress, where 1 man and 5 women transformed fear into their final strength. The air hung thick with gun smoke. The thunder of hooves and dying men's cries were fading. Bodies of horses and riders lay scattered across the field, while Grace's oil fire still burned bright, casting a bloody glow across the cabin's wooden walls. Through the haze and flame, Morrison appeared tall, his black coat billowing, silver revolver gleaming in his hand. He walked forward with steady, deliberate steps, eyes cold as forged steel. When only yards remained, he stopped. His voice rang out like a church bell. "Ward, you think you saved them? All you've done is dig a bigger grave for them and yourself. Around here, the law is what I say it is." Elias pushed himself up, his shoulder bleeding from a grazing shot, but his steel-gray eyes gleamed like a drawn blade. He stepped onto the porch, the Winchester's weight heavy in his hand. Behind him, 5 women stood tall, using their last strength to keep from falling. Clarabelle stepped forward, green eyes locked onto Morrison. She pulled a crumpled stack of papers from her coat, her voice clear and defiant. "You call that law? This is the truth: forged debt contracts, fake seals, a list of every judge and sheriff you bought and paid for." Morrison hesitated, sneering, his voice dripping with scorn. "Paper won't save you when I'm still holding the gun." From the shadows, Violet stepped out, raising a silver locket. Firelight danced across its intricate engravings. "Remember this, Morrison? It belonged to Margaret, your wife. She's still alive, and she told us everything. How you faked her death to steal her father's gold mine. How every woman who stood against you disappeared." This time Morrison's face paled, snapped, voice sharp as a whip. "Lies, that woman died 5 years ago." Grace stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "We met her in Denver just 3 weeks ago. She signed a sworn statement, and the marshal has it now. There's nowhere left to run, Morrison." Morrison's face twitched, fear flashing momentarily, then drowned beneath fury. He let out a roar and raised his pistol at Clara. In that instant, time froze. Elias moved on instinct. He shoved Clarabelle aside and raised the Winchester. 2 shots rang out loud as thunder, tearing the valley apart. Morrison staggered, Ilias's bullet driving deep into his shoulder, knocking the gun from his hand. Ruby stormed forward, her blue eyes blazing. "Your time is finished, Morrison. From this day forward, it's you who will hang." In the flickering firelight, Morrison fell to his knees, hatred burning in his eyes. In the distance, hoofbeats echoed once more, but this time it wasn't his men. The marshal's riders were coming, badges shining in the moonlight. Elias lowered the Winchester, breathing heavily. He knew the war might not be completely over, But the tide had turned. Morrison was no longer a powerful judge. He was just another trembling criminal, finally face to face with the justice he had long denied. The moon hung high, casting silver light across a valley still thick with gunpowder scent. Morrison was dragged away, hands bound tight, his twisted face frozen in powerless rage. The few henchmen who had survived lowered their heads, unable to meet the eyes of Elias or the 5 women they had once strung up like warnings. Marshal Thompson stepped forward, silver beard, eyes sharp as whetted steel. He gave Elias a solemn nod, then turned to Grace, Clarabelle, Ruby, Sadie, and Violet. Justice may arrive late, but it arrives. Now, you accomplished what no court dared to do. You survived and testified. Clarabelle raised her head, black hair falling, over the rope mark on her cheek. Her voice was quiet, but solid as stone. We didn't survive through luck. We survived because he cut the rope. All eyes turned to Elias. He stood still, blood seeping through his shirt, face weathered in the fires. Dying light. He said nothing, just bowed his head. He had never expected to find purpose in inherited land, but now the cabin was no longer a refuge for a lonely man. It had become justice's stronghold, upheld by trembling hands that refused to yield. 3 days later, when the town had settled, Elias rebuilt the cabin gate. The rope that once threatened life had turned to ash. Together, he and the 5 women hammered boards and raised walls. Piece by piece, with every nail driven in, they weren't just constructing a house, they were shaping a family born from the frontier. Sadie replanted the small garden out front, her hands frail but determined. Ruby took charge of the horses, her fiery eyes shining as she watched them run. Violet spent hours sorting documents, preparing evidence to send to the courts. Grace kept the books, her voice stern yet warm like a mother, guiding the rest. And Clarabelle, she stood beside Elias each evening, her green eyes catching the last rays of sunset, a fire that refused to die. One night by the fire, Elias looked around at them. His voice was soft but strong like a log splitting in the hearth. Some ropes are made to kill, but when you find the courage to cut them, they become the ties that bind. I thought I inherited a cabin, but the truth is, I inherited all of you, no one answered. Only Clarabelle placed her hand gently on his, her eyes glowing in the dark. And in that moment, Elias understood. This wild land may be full of smoke and betrayal, but it's also the place where, through ashes and blood, people find trust again, freedom again, and family. The little cabin stood beneath the moonlight. It's no longer a symbol of Morrison's cruelty, but a fortress raised by those who dared to stand tall against the dark. My friend, out here in the West, land can change hands, guns can change owners, but justice belongs to those who never turn their back on one another. And sometimes the most valuable thing we inherit is the chance to become someone better. I hope you live with joy and peace in your heart. That's all I ever want from you. I love you. It has truly been an honor to share this story with you tonight. Tell me what you thought. Leave a comment below. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed this story. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next gripping tale from the Wild West.